Hi, everyone. This is episode 22 of Duke's Download. And today we have a super special guest. I'm really honored and thrilled that our guest today is the Congressman from California's 41st District, Mark Takano. And I see he is on here, so I will send him a request. So excited to have the Congressman on today. Hi, Mark.
Hi, James. Or is it Duke? Which one is it? James?
I play with Duke. Friends and
You're
family.
Duke? So you're Duke. Okay.
Absolutely. No, but thank you, Congressman. Seriously, I'm so honored and grateful that you're willing to come on.
Wait, we're trying to sound. Okay, good. I couldn't hear you, but I can hear you now. Good.
Perfect. I know my sound is bad sometimes on this phone too, so let me know if there's an issue. But no, thank you for taking the time. Seriously. Are you in California right now, or are you in Washington?
I am. I'm in front of my bookcase in my living room in my Riverside condo that I rent. So, yes, I've been in Riverside for, I can't remember how long, about a week and a half. Ever since, I've been here since we voted on the postal office, the post office bill. So I came back after the post office bill, and I'm going to fly back on the 9th. For hearings in Washington. We're back in session for hearings. So
did you fly back? Was it last week, or specifically for the one vote on the post office?
One vote. We flew back, and yeah.
I mean the fact that they make you guys come back to have to vote on these things that shouldn't even have to be protected.
It's unfortunate. It's unfortunate. And flying on airplanes is probably the most dangerous part of my job right now. And where we have the most risk exposure. And the ride from the airport to, but I roll down the windows. I take a lift, and I roll down my windows, and that's how it is. And
well, it's actually something I was going to ask you about, because I was a page in Congress when I was 16. So I actually I know how the Capitol sort of works, and I've, the inner workings, but I was curious, like, how different life is, being a member of Congress and both, in terms of the health issues, like the health, the changes in terms of health, maybe health protocols, but also just like life in general. Like, how different is it compared to the way that things operate before?
Of course, we don't have pages anymore in the House of Representatives.
Oh no, but I mean is COVID and like the change.
Yeah, I just want to clarify for your viewers. So, you were a page, and we don't have pages anymore.
I'm old now. I was one of the last ones.
The one of the last ones, and that's a whole other story for your listeners, or your viewers. What's like now is that most offices, I would say, do not have their staff reporting to work. And so on the Hill, it's pretty deserted. And I'll have one staffer with me when I'm back there to help me, manage my schedule. But with some Republicans are requiring that the members of their staff come, and reportedly Louis Gohmert, who actually got infected with COVID-19, was requiring his staff to come to the Capitol. But most of us aren't. Most of us aren't doing that. Most of us are wearing masks. Mm-hmm. But there are a lot of Republicans walking around without masks. Mm-hmm. It's probably not that damaging. We're social, but they're walking side by side sometimes without masks. And in fairness, some of the older Republicans are wearing masks.
Right.
We don't really congregate on the floor as much. We're discouraged from doing that. We have to kind of talk to each other. That's kind of our job. But the sergeant of arms and the floor staff will break us up and say, don't congregate on the floor. This is not a good example you're setting for the C-SPAN audience. And
right.
so we all comply and that kind of thing.
But you, so you in your office there, you only have one staffer with you in your whole office?
One staffer, the rest are working from home, and the same is true of my district office. I was one of the first members to um, issue that directive, and I did the same for my committee staff. I have a committee staff of 28,
Mm-hmm.
and
Right.
very early on, I said everyone works from home, and shortly after I did that, 2 or 3 days after, it became a matter for all. Each member they have control of their own staff, but and most I would say all of the Democrats have said work remotely.
No, it just must be such a, because like I remember how crazy and how busy the Capitol would be, and and the cloakrooms and all the action. That's part of what makes it so exciting, and so it just must be such a weird and different vibe, around the Capitol, I imagine. But yeah, it's true. And also, it's just people can work virtually now, so you don't need your entire staff there in the office.
Well, it's different, and we're still getting the people's work done.
Right.
It has changed up my legislative strategies. As chairman of a committee, we have to pass things on suspension. And let me explain what that means to your viewers, that suspension bills means you suspend the rules. And you can only do that if you have enough buy-in from the minority party, because they have enough votes to force a vote going through regular procedures. And so you need a supermajority to pass a bill on suspension. The upside of that is that it kind of is set up to pass the Senate and get signed into law, if you can pre-negotiate all your differences. But short of a suspending the rules, you have to put the bill through what's called regular order, and it has to go through a whole full debate. It takes up time on the floor, and we have less floor time. And I'm in competition with other chairmen who say they have important things to pass, and so that is a big change. So we have to operate in a much different way. The urgency of the pandemic was causing us to do things rather remarkably. I mean, a $3 trillion CARES Act passed back in March, $1,200 per person. I mean, think about it. I mean, Republicans even went for that, basically on unanimous consent almost. I mean, it wasn't unanimous consent, but it was a bipartisan agreement to do that. That was broken down, and that's where we are right now.
I just retweeted, in fact, something you tweeted about, the fact that the Senate is stalling on passing another bill, which is just
I find it astounding. With unemployment benefits expiring or having already expired, rent checks are due. I guess the president just signed an executive order, which I think he has the power to do in terms of prohibiting evictions. But I think it only extends to tenants and buildings that have that are financed by federal loan programs. So I don't think his I don't believe his executive order protects everybody. So he's trying to make it look. The president is trying to make it look like he's acting because the Congress isn't. But what's true is that he's refusing to come to an agreement.
Right.
And he's trying to make it look like he can substitute presidential action for congressional inaction.
And yet that's what they criticized President Obama for doing. They were like, oh, lawless, executive orders. And there's some extent you can do with executive orders. So President Obama, they were really upset with his DACA executive order, which
doesn't go too far. I mean, DACA was about deferred action for what DACA stands for, but the idea is that you're not going. You could theoretically deport all these people by using the full power of your office, but to do that would be extremely expensive, extremely disruptive. Mm-hmm. And he said, look, I'm going to execute an executive order directing my Justice Department to prioritize deportation only of those people who are most dangerous criminals, pose the biggest threat. And if you came to the United States at a certain point in your life when you were a minor, and if you met these conditions, you're going to school and you're working, you're not committing crimes, I'm going to give you some security by allowing you to stay by telling the Justice Department not to deport you. I mean, that's basically what DACA is.
I mean, I was only saying of course I support DACA. I just mean this in the sense that it's ironic that they made such a big thing out of it.
I wasn't saying that you were opposing DACA. I'm just sort of saying I just wanted to kind of go over that because the comparison to what Trump is doing, I mean, even so they're tailoring a lot of his executive orders for the moment, but the bottom line is that they're nowhere near what could happen if there were an agreement to do something. I know the Speaker Pelosi believes that, and I believe that the president really wants desperately to have as many checks go out with his name on it as possible, and I think he's ultimately going to come to a deal. But in order for that to happen, we're going to want a lot of other things to go along with that, which are about helping the American people.
Absolutely. And I mean, on a broader level, are you feeling optimistic in the sense that do you think we're going to be able to get through this? I mean, do you think that this is going to be something that goes, I mean, obviously life will probably not return to normal for a long time, but do you think that we're going to get through the worst of this in the near future? Or do you think this could go on into next spring, next summer?
Are you talking about the pandemic? You're talking about COVID-19? I believe we're going to get through this. I believe, and really, when I say we, it's also humanity. I mean, it's unfortunate that the President of the United States, I mean, he just sort of said today that he doesn't want to be a part of any kind of international cooperation to mass produce a vaccine. And at a time when the collective intelligence of all of the research and development resources we have globally, all of the laboratories, to see the United States not playing a constructive leadership role because we have a leader that's very misguided and who's very misguiding, misguides us, is very sad and disheartening. And this is a moment where, nations really should be cooperating. And, science is an international discipline. It relies on, laboratories all over the world being able to replicate results, and, validate the findings and behave objectively. I'm disturbed that the president seems to want to have the FDA and the CDC operate like instruments of the Russian government. I mean, it's Vladimir Putin's the one that's like pushing out a vaccine that only 25% of Russian doctors would take. It's such an expedient move, and expedient in the sense of claiming that you have a solution, a vaccine, when it's very doubtful that people are able to rush this process. so that the vaccine is ready now.
Right.
Dr. Fauci, I actually had a chance to speak with Dr. Fauci with a group of members of Congress.
Wow.
And that's the cool thing about being a member of Congress, is you sometimes get pulled in these meetings. And Dr. Fauci was Dr. Fauci. And he's optimistic about a vaccine. He thinks a vaccine could be ready by January. Could be.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel as if we could be doing. I think Joe Biden is right. I mean, he said during his convention speech, it didn't have to be this bad, right?
Yeah.
I'll grant the president that, he didn't invent coronavirus, and it was bad luck that this occurred. But some of it's not bad luck. I mean, some of it is, there was some defunding of our research assets, actually in Beijing. The fact that he, defunded, an intelligence unit that was devoted to pandemics. So I don't even say it's completely bad luck. I mean, a lot of it does go back on him for the reckless way in which he has wanted to undo everything his predecessor, President Obama, did. But anyway, I don't want to go into. We only have like another 14 minutes, and I want you to get into the questions you have.
No, but I'm fascinated to hear your perspective on that. And since I was going to ask you this towards the end, but since we're on the subject of Trump, do you feel like something I'm really sort of having a lot of dread and a lot of sort of concern about is, I mean, obviously there's every chance that Trump could win the election outright, but that's still a possibility. But I think the thing that a lot of people are getting more and more concerned about is, even if he loses the election, he may try to stay in office and, say the whether because of the mail-in vote system or whatever, he's going to say it's illegitimate. I'm not leaving, that there may be some kind of constitutional crisis. Is that something that you think is a possibility, or are you not really?
It's a possibility with this president. It's a possibility. He has definitely got an authoritarian bent. He operates like an authoritarian. He thinks like one. He doesn't respect democratic mores or democratic norms. He's been willing to cross them. I mean, the whole broadcasting his acceptance speech from the White House is an example of someone who fundamentally doesn't believe in the rule of law and fair play. And you wonder what he's going to do with an intelligence apparatus that he's able to sift out of anybody who's independent and objective in their thinking, and politicize it. Politicize, the post office, the postal service was something that historically was politicized. I mean, in the early 1800s, if you were a postmaster for the federal government in a little frontier town, that was a nice little source of income for you. And political parties, expected to be able to dole out these jobs as a part of a federal spoils system. And that didn't get corrected until the 1870s with the unlikely election of, I forget his name, Millard Fillmore or something like that. That wasn't Millard Fillmore. It was Chester Arthur. A president that does not roll off the tip of your tongue.
Was he the one that was elected twice, 2 different times, or was that?
No, that was James Garfield.
Oh,
I think, yeah. Or Benjamin Harrison was the guy in between. But Chester Arthur, I believe it was Chester Arthur. He's the beginning of the reform, or the end of, and the beginning of a creation of a independent civil service that's professional and merit-based and minimally politicized. And that's why we have this thing called the Hatch Act. The Hatch Act prohibits political organizing among federal employees.
Right.
And so what we saw last week with the president, Secretary of State, just using federal resources in such a way. I mean, I've got to be careful how I use, federal resources.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Right.
I can't make direct appeals for people to go and vote for this or that.
Well, I just thought. I mean, when I watched I can't believe I was able to sit through the convention, but like when I saw the image of the fireworks flying at Trump over the National Mall, I'm like, possible that he's using federal land or federal park or whatever it is, monuments to like do fireworks over the mall. It's like they don't even do that kind of like celebration on July 4th. I mean, that was like absurdly
it's
decadent or like over the top.
It's hurtful to see so many of our fellow Americans give him a pass on it. I mean, I think most Americans believe it's wrong. I think most Americans have made up their minds about Donald Trump. And I just want to encourage everybody out there. I know some people are getting really nervous and really anxious, and that's kind of how Democrats are.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not random. We are that way for a reason. It's because we're not like all alike. We are a coalition of different people,
Mm-hmm.
and we have to build trust and confidence in each other.
Mm-hmm.
And we're not in natural solidarity all the time with each other. So we constantly have to tend to each other.
Mm-hmm.
And we're scared that some group is going to go south on us. Whereas Republicans are more homogeneous.
Mm-hmm.
They exude, and they are actually more confident emotionally. And so you can't let them psych you out that way. Don't let Republicans psych you out. Seriously. And that's what John Lewis means when my late colleague John Lewis. I'll tell you, I didn't realize how upset I was the day that Justice Kennedy resigned from the court when he retired. And I was in an elevator that very morning going up to vote. And I was alone in the elevator with John Lewis. And it was kind of silent. And I was kind of like staring up. I don't know what I was lost in place. And he broke the silence and he said, "What's the matter, brother?" And it was almost like an intrusion into my private space. And I said, I was embarrassed. And I said, "Well, sir, I suppose I'm a little disappointed by today's news." And he was well aware of the news because he knew that a lot of progressives were upset by this news.
That was a tough day.
Yeah, and he took my hand and he said, "Don't you worry. We're going to get through this." And I went to the floor and voted. And then I went back to my office and sat in my chair behind my desk. And I was looking at my social media. And then I saw a tweet by John Lewis. And he said, "Don't get lost." There's a famous tweet that everyone was quoting when they were paying tributes to him on his death. It said, "Don't get lost in a sea of despair. Be hopeful. Be optimistic. Never be afraid to speak out. Don't be afraid to get into good trouble, necessary trouble."
Mm-hmm.
And but the most important part of that quote was, ours is not the battle of a day, a week, a month, or a year. Ours is the battle of a lifetime.
Wow.
And I said, we're just going to have to be ready to fight. I mean, we thought that we had a chance with Hillary Clinton in office to be able to get a different Supreme Court, but of course Justice Kennedy's retirement made us all understand that we would have a retrogressive force for a generation, maybe, to stop us or to slow us down. And I said, we just have to pull ourselves together, prepare ourselves for a longer, tougher fight. And so, I mean, and you know, I thought about John Lewis. I mean, I thought about him being 23 years old in the 60s, and he really did experience fascism in America.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, black people have lived under authoritarian,
Totally.
unfair, brutal regimes.
Mm-hmm.
The law being used against them. I'm not saying I wish that on all of us. I'm saying that that we got to be concerned. Yes, this. So go back to your earlier question. I didn't really answer. Yeah, this president could do some terrible things. Not really be on board for a peaceful transition. Undermine the elections. But let me guys give you one thing that maybe not you should worry about, but why you should care about the House of Representatives, not only the Senate. I think we need to care about making sure that we not only keep our majority, but we also expand our majority. But we also got to keep track of the number of state delegations that we control. Right now, Democrats control 24 out of the 50 state delegations. Why are we concerned about that? Because if the elections are not resolved by the Electoral College, it gets thrown to the House. Right. And the House doesn't just vote majority rule, they vote according to state delegations, with each state getting one vote. Mm-hmm. And so we need to if we can make sure that we control 26 or more delegations, and Donald Trump knows that if he tries to undermine Florida, undermine Michigan, undermine a clutch of states so that he jams the Electoral College, that it will not go his way in the House of Representatives. Right. If he knows that's an out, it's more of an incentive. So, it's a little technicality, but I think it kind of matters. Don't you think? It makes sense. You can see how, like, if Donald Trump sees that he's got no chance in the House, that, well, maybe he's going to not play out a little scheme to throw in doubt a handful, because it won't be just Florida. If it's close. So the other thing is we can't afford it to have it be close.
Yep. And it needs to. Yeah. I mean, as I think Kamala Harris said, it needs to be a mandate. It can't just be a narrow margin, and that's not going to be good enough to give him the swift kick that he needs, that's needed to get him out of there. I know we're running out of time, but before you go, I wanted to ask you. Obviously, being a LGBTQ activist or caring deeply about those issues, I've always admired you. Not only because you ran as an openly gay candidate in 2012, which was hard enough. There were still only a handful of LGBTQ members of Congress back then. But the fact that you ran as an openly gay candidate in 1992 and 1994.
Hold up. Don't give me too much credit. I wasn't really out in 92. I came really close and almost won in 90. Right. I was 92. 94, they didn't underestimate me. They understood that I came very close to winning 92. So 94, a right-wing senator outed me at a meeting of right-wing clergy, and he said, I've heard Mark Takano's a homosexual, but I don't know about you, but I don't want a homosexual representing us in Washington, D.C. That was carried by a weekly conservative paper. The Daily Press Enterprise felt they had to do a story. And so they came to me and said, is it true what they said? And I wasn't really straight. I said, well, this is just my opponent's way of trying to avoid the fact that he was caught in the car with a prostitute and try to run away from the police. I would go on to lose the 94 election, but I was basically outed in 1984. I think the thing that maybe is praiseworthy is the fact that I decided not to give up. And in 1995, I ran for re-election for my local office after this terribly, horribly negative campaign where they sent pink and lavender mailers out to voters asking the question, is Mark Takano a congressman for Riverside or San Francisco? right? He's supported by the homosexual human rights campaign. And I stayed in the game, and I learned a lot over the next 18 years. Mm-hmm. And so you could say it's kind of like what happened with Elizabeth Warren. Persisted.
Yep. Absolutely.
I persisted. And sometimes persistence is 90% of it.
Absolutely. And I mean, even 2012, I was following politics back then, even though I was young, and
You're still young. You're still young. You're still a child.
I'm inching up there, but thank you. But no, I think Barney Frank, Tammy Baldwin, maybe I think Jared Polis was in Congress already at that point. But do you feel? I mean, obviously, you just talked about how different it was 25 years ago. But do you feel, was that like something that you were really conscious of, like when you were running in 2012? Like, were you ever worried, or was that like a conscious thing of this is something that may preclude me from being in politics and running for office? Was that a tough thing?
Well, the remarkable thing is during that 18-year span, things got a lot better. And what was a liability in 1994, something that I wasn't completely straight about, so to speak, I had a hard time getting the press to pay attention to the fact that I was gay. And the stories in the press were mainly about what was it like then, what was it like now. And, I was eagerly seeking out, wanting it to be known. I wanted gay supporters out there to know that they had a chance to elect another person who was LGBTQ to Congress. And we needed to get that word out there to excite a donor base. And so being gay in 2012 became more of an asset. And it was a double-edged sword for my opponent, because to use it might have gained them something with some voters, but it also would have turned off a number of voters who had come to accept LGBT people. And let me just say this one last thing. We'll end on this. So the year I was elected, we expanded the LGBTQ caucus, I think by 2. We went from 4 to 6 members of the House, even as Tammy Baldwin went to the Senate, and even as Barney Frank retired, right? So I could say we just elected the gayest Congress in history that we know of, because we always think that there's somebody who's still in the closet. And then 2 years later, we elect more gay people to Congress. And so I could say in 2014, we just elected the gayest Congress in history. And I could say it again in 2016. And in 2018, not only do we elect the gayest Congress in history, but we also elected a Native American lesbian. Yep. And this year already, even though it's not November yet, we've elected 2 male persons of color, yep. One African American, one Afro Puerto Rican. So already I could say, if everybody got reelected, I could already say, hey, we just elected the gayest Congress in history because we've added to our numbers. But we still have Georgette Gomez, who's running for Congress in San Diego, and we have Dina Ortiz-Jones, yep. John Hoadley, and there's a 4th candidate up in Washington State who identifies as bisexual. I'm forgetting her name. But if every one of those people gets elected, and we reelect everybody else, I can say in 2020 we just elected the gayest Congress in history, the gayest, most diverse caucus we've ever had. Yep.
And you were the first openly gay person of color elected to Congress. Is that right?
That's right. Wow. That we know of. There might have been, who knows? But yeah, no. Well, actually, openly gay is like the big dividing line, right? Because if they weren't open, then it's not like if you're not out, it doesn't count. So whatever.
Well, thank you, Congressman. You're an inspiration, a role model for me, and I admire you and respect you, and thank you for everything you do. And so grateful that you took a little time. I really appreciate it.
Well, I know we need people like you with followings and influencing, and I admire what you're doing. I admire your activism and how you inspire people. I mean, I think you've got 3 times the following I do on Instagram. So, you know, I'll do what I can for the cause, and I hope you get way more followers and you get them all to vote. So you're doing your part, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. Stay safe, and hopefully talk to you soon.
All right.
Thank you so much.
See ya.
Have a good night. Bye. Bye.